Samantha, welcome everybody. Okay, now for real, I will go ahead and get this party started for real. All right. So, hi everybody. Thanks for joining us today at our Friday speaker series. Again, feel free to put your name in the chat. Unfortunately, for some reason, we're having some trouble connecting to Facebook, but we'll try to get that solved before next week. As you all know, white Christian nationalism is the greatest threat to our democracy, and secular AZ is your voice for the separation of religion and government. We are a nonprofit organization, and we act as your voice to elected officials all across the state and at every level. So be sure to check out all of our social media channels and like, subscribe, and share. We have incredible programming, including our Friday updates like this from all kinds of amazing speakers. We have historians, authors, elected officials, journalists, etc. Next Friday, we are going to be speaking with none other than Melinda Merkel-Eyer, who is with Civic Engagement Beyond Voting, CEBV, and she'll be giving us an in-depth update about what's happening at the Arizona legislature, so you won't want to miss that. I tried to do what Melissa's going to do next week. I tried to do that last week, and it was really just a shell of what you're going to see next week. So rest assured, Melinda doesn't miss a beat. I also encouraged everybody to go to the CEBV happy hour on Sunday, not remembering that it was actually Super Bowl Sunday. So there will be a happy hour this week. And if you are new or even not so new to the legislature, it's one of those weekly updates that you don't want to miss. So if you're not already signed up for their weekly updates and their happy hours on Sunday, be sure to do that. But for today, I'm so excited. Today, we have Jen Fifield. Jen, and I know that so many of you have heard about her before. She's a reporter for VoteBeat. She previously covered Maricopa County and Phoenix for the Arizona Republic, including the high-profile review of the county's 2020 election. So be ready with your questions because she wants this to be more conversational. Prior to that, she covered politics and government for local newspapers in Maryland and state policy for Stateline, a news service run by the Pew Charitable Trusts. She has won several regional press awards in Arizona and Maryland for her investigative feature politics and education reporting. She is a Phoenix native and graduated from Arizona State University's Cronkite School. Forks up, everybody, but be careful because, given the state of our state legislature, even Sparky might be against the law in the coming weeks and months. So anyway, sorry about that, Jen. If there is anything that I missed in your bio, please fill in any blank.
Thank you so much. No, it's so exciting to be here. I am pleased to meet you all. I'm really thrilled to see everyone from across the state because, as she said, I'm mostly from Maricopa my whole life, and that's part of what I've been trying to do at VoteBeat is find out more about all corners of the state. So that's exciting. And I'd love to hear like specific questions about your county too, and like what you're thinking about in your county, if you want to put them in the chat. I am a journalist, so I don't come with a presentation. I'm just here to tell you a little bit about what I've been working on and talk you through some of the potential things I'm watching as we get into the election cycle and with all the lawsuits going on and everything like that. I've covered a lot of extremism. That's kind of up your alley a little bit. So I'll touch on that and then we'll go from there. But I really just, if you have any questions for what I've covered before, like she said, I was at the Republic. I've been covering elections now straight since 2020 and done a lot of misinformation reporting. And now I'm at VoteBeat, which is a startup. We're in 4 states and coming into Wisconsin. So I'm excited because we get to experiment a lot with our coverage. I don't do the daily news anymore. I'm able to kind of go off of what other people are reporting on, look deeper, do in-depth stories, go across the state, all of that. Awesome for Marana. That's cool. So I guess I'll start with what I'm watching right now. And like last week was really intense for me. I was at the legislature all week and it was a very intense week there for elections. There was more negotiating on election timeline issues than I've seen, or on election issues than I've seen since starting to cover the topic. People were working together to try to solve this timeline issue that we had where we weren't sure if we were going to be able to count our ballots on time, get our presidential election done on time, and people were, in back rooms talking, and there was a lot of emotion. So we figured that out. I wrote a story on Friday. Was it Friday? I don't even know anymore. Was it Friday?
Once the legislature is in session, it's like COVID all over again. Like time, there's no time doesn't make sense anymore. So it could have been any day.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I wrote a story about the solution if you're interested, but basically our primary election is moving up a week, which gives candidates a week less time, which was one concern that I heard immediately when my story came out, to gather signatures, and all the deadlines are moved up for the election. There's a few other changes regarding voting that we can talk a little bit more about. I did want to start, if it's okay, with just kind of running through what I'm watching in the lead up of the election. So we have the election procedures manual that Adrian Fontes signed in January. It is being challenged from 3 Republican groups right now. We have the state lawmakers that are challenging it. We have the GOP that's challenging it. And we also have the Free Enterprise Club. And they all have different complaints about it. But really, there's not many things that might change for this election, but that's kind of what I'm trying to look at for my next story. There's this issue of unstaffed drop boxes. There's this issue of voter intimidation at drop boxes, which we saw in 2022 that has come up that is still lingering. So I'm watching for that and thinking about how to write about that in the coming months. And the big thing that might change if courts get to it in a quick manner here is, can we have unstaffed drop boxes for our ballots? That's kind of the overall thing that might change for this election. Probably not. The courts probably will say that we're good, but it is one thing that I wrote about where the laws aren't exactly clear on this topic. Which brings me to another topic, which is hand counting ballots. As you guys know, there's been big pushes across the state in many counties to hand count ballots and get rid of voting machines. I was just in Cochise County last month, and they're trying to convince people that our voting machines are secure still. Mojave County, a supervisor's filed a lawsuit trying to say that hand counting is legal here, that we don't have to use machines. VoteBeat has written extensively on why that is not a good idea. I'm a reporter, don't take positions on issues, but that issue is one where we have so much evidence that hand counting ballots is not secure and could lead to inaccurate results, could throw off voter confidence in the results as well. It takes a long time, makes more resources. So that's one issue that we're following in the lead up to the election. I wouldn't say that we would have any threat that machines won't be used in 2024, because it is 2024 and you can't change election rules that close to an election. So that is something that's come up. And are you watching the chat? I just want to make sure I'm not missing any.
I am watching the chat. It's mostly just people like introducing themselves. So I'll be sure to watch it. You don't have to worry about it.
Thank you. And so those are kind of the 2 main things prior to the election cycle that I'm looking at and going to be writing a lot more about. There's a whole bunch of other stuff in court, and we can go there a little bit. So there's the Dropbox issue is in court. Hand counting ballots is in court. The way we're reviewing our voter signatures on ballots is in court. Republicans are saying that we shouldn't be able to use so many past records to look at our signatures. And they're challenging a few other aspects of that. So that's one thing I'll be writing about. That might potentially lead to more rejected ballots. That was something in the election procedures manual that was kind of a sticking point, as well as in the timeline fight. It came up that now we have certain standards we need to follow when we verify voter signatures, which sounds like a great thing, but there could be unintended consequences that come from that. So that's those are all things that are in court right now. Carrie Lake still has her lawsuit in court, but a lot of these things, other than what I mentioned, probably won't change the upcoming election. So now I'll switch to talking about voter citizenship laws a little bit. So we were in court in late last year over 2022 laws regarding voter citizenship, and I'm going to send some links right now. There's a few laws that are currently being challenged. This would not affect the 2024 election, but Republicans want voter citizenship investigated more and more frequently for federal-only voters here. We allow people to vote in federal-only elections if they do not provide proof of citizenship. If they just attest to being a citizen, then we allow them to vote in federal elections. But that's come up now in the EPM lawsuit. That's come up in this court lawsuit in court saying that we shouldn't be allowing people to be on this federal only list voting for president and doing our mail-in voting system if they haven't provided this documented proof of citizenship. So that is a big thing that I have been following. The judge has yet to rule on that last story that I posted. I'm still waiting on that, but although that wouldn't affect this election, it very much has consequences for future elections. So that is something to just be aware of.
We do have a question in the chat, yes, and it's from Jude, and she asked, how hard or easy is it for a journalist like yourself to get access to legislators?
That's a great question. I am not a legislative reporter, so for me, it's a little harder. So when I was at the other thing is it's easier for people like at the Arizona Republic because you have this like group of people who has everyone's phone numbers, right? Has everyone's cell phone numbers. And so I used to have that resource at the Republic of all the editors there to help, all the reporters there to help. So if you're like an independent journalist, or if you're a journalist who hasn't covered or isn't there every day, it's a lot harder. If you, like I did just last week, if you have people's cell phones numbers, you can just call them and they pretty much will answer, at least for me. Newer journalists, maybe not so much. And I went there last week and I know my way around enough where I was able to like know who was in the hallways and like kind of try to stop people to talk to them. I was allowed into the Senate. There's rules on who can do that. And you can talk to people when after the session is complete, you can walk up on the floor and talk to them. So there's access there. You just kind of have to know your way around and like have resources to get there. So it's a little harder for people like me that are trying to like jump in for one topic rather than like people that are there, all the time. I don't know what your access is like.
Somebody who generally just covers, say, like the Senate, probably even has way more access to those senators.
Definitely. I mean, and they like have their cell phone, they're texting all the time, they're like following every issue. So it's a lot easier. And, it's pretty open environment for journalists who are trusted, who have a reputation of writing fair stories. And so, but also they could decide they don't like someone at any given time and stop talking to them. So it's a little tricky. And you guys probably know that like as advocates that, sometimes if you're cut off from a certain sphere of people, then it can be harder to get access again.
Yeah, it's really like, some of the lobbyists who I had a call this morning, and there's some lobbyists who seem to always have to testify for the worst bills with the worst sponsors, and the abuse that they take from the other side of the dais is just, I mean, I really don't know how they do it. I don't know how they can get up there and just know that they're going to be misrepresented, abused, accosted, all the things. It's tough down there.
It is, and I can talk a little bit about what I've seen for elections this year. There is a group called Opportunity Arizona that's been banned before, and from committee, and I've seen that play out this year again, where he gets up to speak and he's immediately told that he's not able to speak. by people who are very pro free speech. And so that's very disheartening for me to see. And, I think journalists always do want to know when that's happening, is one thing I'll say. Like, no matter what they're covering, or what journalist it is, if people are being cut off from free speech and First Amendment rights, then that's definitely an issue. Um, so I've been watching that a little bit. It was not it was not Senator Hoffman, but there are, yeah, mm, there are certain lawmakers that are more sensitive to certain words. One of the main things for Opportunity Arizona was not saying the word conspiracy theorist in a committee. And as you guys know, there are conspiracies in elections that are false, that it's hard for me to understand that, because I know that these people are smart. I know that they know the truth of things, and then
Okay,
they're
wait. Okay, wait. Hold on. Because you just said that some of these people are smart. So I want to clarify that. Like when you say like these election deniers, because I wonder this a lot. Like, do they like? And you saying that they're smart, I'm not sure anymore because of the number of bills that are created based on completely false conspiracy theories, right? Like so. Are they smart because do they believe this? I guess that's my question. Do they really believe that our elections are in such case? Do they really believe that Trump is the president right now? Do they really believe that James Woods is pretending? Like that's what I really want to know from your opinion. Do you really think that these folks who are in power are doing this because they believe it, or they're just doing it because their base loves it?
I think it's depending on who you talk to. I think, Wendy Rogers believes that, everything that she says, from from everything that I've seen. I think some lawmakers go along with certain things on both sides, but on this issue in particular, there's big, as you know, there's a lot of pressure to, get the support of Donald Trump and get the support of Carrie Lake. And so some lawmakers may be more inclined to introduce bills that, they themselves have doubts of if it will improve elections. Um, I'm not sure if you guys saw this week with Rachel Jones introducing a bill that would take away the presidential vote in Arizona from the people. And it received a lot of pushback, which was, it was different for me to watch that, because it's hard for people to speak up against that kind of thing right now in this atmosphere. It received Republican pushback. But I think that, the 2020 fake electors, potentially being investigated by the Attorney General right now. There's a few things that are maybe influencing behind the scenes on what lines people are going to cross and what they're going to propose this year. So I think it's depending on who you talk to, and there are some true believers, and there are people that behind the scenes may be just trying to get certain people's support. So yeah. I can talk a little bit more about extremism, and then I can just like see if you guys have any questions for me. Um, I just recently did a Pointner talk about extremism and how to cover extremism, how to talk to people. I noticed you use the word election denier, so I thought I would start there. We actually don't use that word at VoteBeat, and one of one of the reasons why is because we feel like it does isolate a certain crowd into thinking. I mean, people call themselves proudly election deniers now. What they mean by that, we don't actually know. So we think it's good to be more specific about language, and also when talking personally to people who have doubts about elections, to ask them, do you believe the election was stolen in 2020? Do you believe our elections are still going to be stolen in 2024? And so trying to like cover the topic of extremism is difficult if you're isolating a crowd. the other thing that we talked a lot about in that was just kind of like how to stay in contact with groups that you're watching or monitoring. And one thing I really like to do is just to kind of treat people like humans all around, and not, not, I think that there's certain, people that think, oh, we should not pay attention to that crowd because they're nuts, or that's actually my like extreme opposite approach. I want to be like part of that crowd. And I want to like open up the conversation to see where they're going next, like what their plan is for 2024. I'm watching a lot of like what Patrick Byrne and Mike Flynn are doing because of how they tried to interfere with our elections in 2020, and kind of seeing the grassroots movements behind the scene on that, trying to follow that a little bit more. So I will say that's like a big part of my 2024 work is monitoring the next thing.
Right. So far, I'm not seeing any questions here in the chat. So come on, this is your opportunity, folks. Questions come. Oh, here we go. Here we go. From Andrew. Andrew says, have you done or do you know of any in-depth reporting on the fraud convictions in AZ elections in 2020? So there's the first part of that question. People I know always want to point out that those few cases as proof of voter fraud, but I haven't found any good reporting that fully explains the details of those cases. So have you done or do you know of any in-depth reporting?
That's a great question. I think I may have covered it at the Republic when it was first. I mean, this is 3 years ago now. There were a few cases in Yuma, where there were political leaders collecting ballots at a like kind of like a voter registration setup. And they were collecting ballots and filling out ballots for people. And those were investigated by the Attorney General and convicted. And those are the two 2020 cases that come to mind when you say that. There were a few cases of double voting too. And they're all listed on the Attorney General's website, but I have not seen a lot of reporting in detail about that. And I think that brings up a good point, which is like, we do need to talk about the fact that this does happen. Sometimes like there are bad people in the world on every occupation in every in every area. And we need to talk about it because that helps show that, the very few cases do, they're convicted and they go through, they don't go fly under the radar. It's very, very hard to commit voter fraud on a wide scale without anyone knowing. So like talking about all of those, yeah, Brnovich published a list of cases. Talking about all of those is really important.
Well, speaking of, the AZ elections in 2020, we've seen other states who have started to target some of these fake electors in other states and bring about charges. Do you think that Attorney General Chris Mays is working on that right now? I just wonder what your thoughts are on that.
So we've kind of decided not to cover the day-to-day of that investigation, but the latest is that, by March, there were supposedly supposed to be the investigation would conclude in some way, but that's very vague. I don't know if that meant bring charges or if that's just like when the deadline was for the investigators to get everything together. So I would expect we find out next month what's going to happen there. I do know that like, there's a lot of connectivity between the cases in different states, and the federal case on this. And so if we see charges coming or convictions coming, it's interesting to look at like how those are playing out compared to how they might hear. But I haven't done a lot of reporting on it.
Okay. Oh, look, we have something popping up in the Q&A. This one comes from Marie. Would politicians who interfered with 2020 elections characterize themselves as election interferers, or would they see themselves as election facilitators?
Can you repeat that? Sorry, go ahead.
Sure. It says, would politicians, so they're asking you to kind of make an assessment here. Would politicians who interfered with the 2020 election characterize themselves as election interferers, or would they see themselves as election facilitators?
Well, specifically like in Cochise County, we had the two supervisors that voted against certifying the election twice or delaying it at least. And they very much see themselves as election integrity activists that saw problems in Maricopa County's elections and therefore thought that they had to stop their local election from being certified. And that's the way a lot of people characterize themselves as activists. Um, but I think that it's not really up to them to characterize themselves because we know their actions, right? So two supervisors who attempted to block the certification of the election is a descriptor that I've used many times in my story.
Yeah, and it's I can imagine, because you're a journalist, you need to be impartial, and so language is very important. Let's see, there was somebody in the chat, and I'm kind of guessing, because I know your work, that you are really focused on elections, right? And that the bills that are happening, and what's happening to the players who deny elections or who are trying to influence elections. So somebody in the chat asked you about the Respect Act. This is the one about anti-satan, or about not allowing satanic displays. I'm assuming you don't have input, but I don't want to put words in your mouth either.
I have read this story, so you guys know more than me on that. I really think you do. I'm sorry that I can't weigh in on that.
No, that's okay. I mean, like,
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine if I was, a reporter and had to pay attention to all things. It's why you all have your beats set the way that you do, because it's a lot of layers in every single area. So, okay, I had a question. Let me see if I can remember what the question was. It was about, oh shoot, I'm not going to be able to remember it. Okay, there's another question here that I'm confused about. It says you're not following abortion. So I think, Farrell, yeah, same thing. I mean, I'm sure that Jen, again, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, you probably are passionate about a whole bunch of issues, but as a journalist, you're focused specifically on election bills and legislation that are moving through.
Yeah, well, the one way that might cross over is how potentially there could be efforts to block abortion from getting on the ballot and how that might play out this year. So that is one area that I'm keeping my eye on. Like signatures are due on July, what is it? Is it July 3rd, I believe, for the ballot initiative. So that's going to be a big time for this kind of news to come out about what voters are going to see. And that's kind of like my intersection with that world. But of course, it also will, affect voter turnout if it's on the ballot or not. So those are the kind of things that I'm watching on that lane.
And I mean, you focus on elections nationally, not just specifically in certain states. So I wonder too, oh wait, hold on, there's a question here. What is the current word about states refusing to put Trump on the ballot? And is there anything to report along that vein? Great question, Matt.
That is a great question. I think that we're going to see very soon a Supreme Court decision come down on that topic. Whether or not the Supreme Court will go there, like I haven't written about it, but I've read a lot of legal articles about it. I don't think that it's very likely that he will be blocked nationally from the ballot. I don't know if the Supreme Court will go to the point of stopping a state from doing that. So it is a very complicated issue. But I think that we will know hopefully like now if that's going to happen. There's so many cases in Arizona. I would say there's not an active case that has received much attention on it, so I wouldn't be too like focused on it for our voters.
So I have a question. Like, I'm thinking about how what we're seeing in this legislative session, and maybe to a lesser degree last legislative session, is this explosion of House and Senate concurrent resolutions. I think today we said that I was in a meeting earlier today, and I think the latest count is 37. So 37 bills that would circumvent the governor's veto pen and go directly to the voters. My question is, how many other states are like Arizona in that regard, where we have a Democratic governor, where we have a split leadership with our legislature and our executive branch? And is this, if that's something that's happening in other states, are other states legislatures who are overly like, lean one way, are they doing the same thing with this like flurry of concurrent resolutions?
I think our makeup is so unique here right now that, it's kind of like consider this the only hope for getting something to the voters or from getting something passed. So I know a lot of states have long ballots. That's the way my election mind works, is this is going to make for a really long ballot here for voters and really complicated language in each of the proposals that are probably going to confuse some voters. So that's worrisome. But I know that other states have these long ballots with lots of questions, but the statewide measure of them is different. Like we have them coming directly from our state lawmakers here. Whereas a lot of the states, they have like a lot of local questions and everything. So I think that you're right. This is like a very unique thing where they see this as like their one chance of getting something. So, yeah, I've also heard that this is going to be counties are looking at like 2-card ballots because of it, which would mean getting like 2 pages, and just a lot of language. So, that's something to watch for.
A lot. And Erica, who is a consistent advocate for rights for the LGBTQ community, says 24 ballot initiative bills filed in the Senate, of which 20 are still alive, 36 ballot initiatives bills in the House, of which 9 are still alive. So thank you for that, Erica. And we can trust that Erica is following this like in a steadfast manner. Let's see. Refusing. Okay, we already answered that question. Jim has a comment here that says the Supreme Court seems very likely to overturn the Colorado Supreme Court 9-0 or 8-1. Do you want to comment on that, Jim?
His guess is as good as mine, I guess. I mean, I have, the legal writing that I've that I've read on it has not favored that channel. It has not said that Colorado will succeed in doing this, but I guess we will see. So
Yeah, no, I mean, we don't expect you to be a soothsayer or anything like that, but
I'm not a lawyer, but
Judy has a question. How strong are the cases of those suing about the election manual by Adrian Fontes, our Secretary of State?
There's 3 cases. The one that there's 2 very detailed cases that challenge like specific portions of the manual that are a little bit more likely to kind of raise raise good questions about law. And those are the ones filed by the Republican legislative leaders, and the Free Enterprise Club, which kind of pick apart the exact language in the manual that could be challenged. One of the problems with our election law is sometimes it's like unspecific, leaving a lot of gray area. And so Republicans here have made it a mission to pick apart that language to make sure that everyone is clear on what can and can't be done, and also in ways that might benefit them and their advocacy. So the one from the GOP is a little bit more broad. It's talking about the 15-day comment period that's supposed to happen and about these voter citizenship laws that are going to make it all the way probably to the Supreme Court. So that one's a little bit more out there. And I don't know if these cases would be consolidated or not. That's one thing that I'm watching in the next month.
Okay, I see that Samantha has a question. I'm going to get to it in just a second, but while I'm thinking of it, because my menopausal brain will just flip right past this question and go to the next one. I'm curious about like all these appointments. Holy moly. Like I knew that the legislature was a terrible place to be, but our elected officials have discovered how terrible it is and they're stepping down one by one. So like I'm curious. I really want to talk about LD22, and I don't know how down in the nitty gritty you get with that, but like, what are the next steps? Is it LD22, right? The Lisa's son. What are the next steps for them since they missed that deadline?
I don't know. I just saw that. I'm sorry. I just saw that and I don't actually know what happens. It is crazy to see everyone at once going. The one thing that I do pay attention to this is like the county supervisors don't really want a part of it anymore, which is interesting. But like after this, they probably don't want anything to do with it because it's a lot of work. So,
yeah. And the fact that it's happened, what have we had so far this session? Like 5?
Yeah.
I mean, of course, Lisa's son was, you know, expelled. That in and of itself was like a telenovela. It's such a weird time to be alive. Worst timeline ever. This is a good question, and I'm sure it's difficult for you to answer as a journalist because it's kind of almost loaded. And I'm not saying that to dig on you, Samantha, but the question is, do you think that the act of not taking sides in reporting can be detrimental only to Dems because Republicans / conservatives don't care about only taking their side and beliefs?
Well, that's a very I'm asked that all the time. It's a very complicated answer, and different reporters approach this differently. But I am about like the truth and the facts. And so it's not really about taking sides to me. If, if there's if there's misinformation about the election, if there's a call for that there were more ballots than voters, that's false. And I'm happy to say that's false, and to spread that widely and to challenge Republicans on it, and to talk about the implications that come from that kind of a lie to voter confidence. And I think like pointing out things that we know to be false and then pointing out things we know to be a lie because of evidence that they're lies is really important. But I think that there is a little bit of, if you start to write in a way that's only going to be appealing to a Democratic audience, and only tell that side of what's going on, I think that's not useful, and I don't think it helps the conversation. So I think talking to everyone about the underlying mission in their bills, in their proposals. What are you trying to do here? Why do you think that's positive? Why do you think that helps voters? What's the facts behind why it doesn't help voters in some cases? Like, I think that's all really helpful to the conversation.
Yeah, some of my favorite questions when these bills are being introduced in our legislature are and the Dems are frequently they lead with this question. So what happened to make you please explain to us the origin, like what happened specifically? And so frequently the answer is like, well, a constituent doesn't feel like their vote is being counted. So a lot of these bills are based on perhaps angry constituents who don't feel like their vote is being counted, despite the fact that it's totally being counted in a way that's been vetted, and even in a way that our state is kind of led. As far, I mean, like we were one of the first states, I feel like, to have more alternatives to just like going into your polling station. We had mail-in ballots that I believe back in the 2000s was an initiative that was led by the Republican Party. So it's important, I think, to point that kind of stuff out too. There's I've been listening to NPR now for like 30 years, and on and off have been a member, and I've noticed, like how now things that are just completely false, they just say it out loud. Like before, I think, and when we were all trying to figure out what the heck was going on with Trump, a lot of news outlets were like, just this is what that person said, this is what that person said. But now it's like, well, he said this, but that's been proven time and time again that it's false. So I do see that there's like an attempt now with media to say, clearly this is wrong, but we still have to report the news to you.
Yeah, that's so important. Just like that follow-up
Um,
line in my stories is often important to have that line that says this has been presented in a court and the judge has, decided that it's not the truth. So
yeah. Or, like they'll be interviewing somebody and then they'll, in the editing, they'll say they wrongly said this. And here's the proof that this is not what was, what actually happened. So I appreciate that. Matt says reality is on our side. So if you're loyal to the truth, then really you are on our side. I don't even know how to I don't lie because I can't remember my life. So, like how these people are able to just kind of misrepresent the truth and then be able to remember all their lies is really difficult. If you stick to the truth, you're going to be fine. Dale says regarding appointment of a replacement for Sun, it's more evidence than I'm not part of an organized party. I'm a Democrat. Quote by Will Rogers. Let's see. Thumbs up for facts versus incorrect information rather than sides. Absolutely. That comes from Jim. Ravon says that the Arizona Daily Star reports that currently Republican legislature states control 308 electors, far more than the 270 needed to win. Any worry about false electors in this presidential election? Great question.
Yeah, that is a good question. Like I said, there's consequences coming for the fake electors in 2020 that I think people are watching and are still playing out. And I think that if something does occur, journalists, states, attorney generals will be more on top of it this time. So like I'm an optimist. I believe that there's more attention to I guess schemes that could be used in the upcoming election to try to overturn the will of the voters. And that extra attention may make it less likely, or like the consequences may make it less likely. And I think there's always backstops, right? Like the court is always a backstop. So even if there are states that attempt to do this, we will see that play out in court. And I think that should give voters confidence.
I don't know if you'll be able to answer this question, but I wonder if you could maybe pontificate about how much these election cases and denials, and then legal teams reviewing some of these bills and finding that they're like, how much does this cost us? How much do these lives cost the taxpayers?
Well, I would say the audit cost 5 million plus of the state security for that function, lawsuits that happened because of it. And the counties have all had to increase their misinformation. Their communication staff is like focused on this, right? So that's more resources being put into like disinformation, misinformation. The federal government has like growing misinformation, disinformation teams. And anytime there's a lawsuit on this, it is costing taxpayer dollars. For example, the EPM lawsuits. We have right now our state lawmakers in a lawsuit with the Secretary of State's office. That is state on state, lawyers on both sides making a lot of money. So anytime there's a lawsuit, I always want to know who's getting paid and like, are there outside attorneys being paid as well? So it's it's still playing out, but it's costed us millions so far.
And I think it's so important to talk about that, especially, again, we're a nonpartisan organization. It's not about Republicans or Democrats, but we know that the evangelical extremists tend to be on the right side, and they are the ones who are, causing all of the, I saw Adrian Fontes posted something recently about how these election denial decisions cost money. Like there were reams of like paper, I think in Cochise County, that because somebody thought that the paper was, somehow changing votes. I don't even know. Like I can't keep up with it. But
I wrote that story.
that was you. Okay, see, there you go. But like, and it cost the taxpayers like how much money for that paper?
170, we'll be left with about $175,000 in supplies that we've paid for. I can post that link too. I don't know if I already shared it, but yeah, there's things like that where, there's going to be trials, like the hand counting trials, are costing the counties money to look into, like all of this is resource intensive. So.
And then, I keep hearing over and over. I mean, we heard about what happened to the mother and daughter from Georgia and the death threats. Like Adrian Fontes has also talked about like the shortage of people who are willing to work in elections now because of that kind of behavior. So how concerned are you also? And I don't want to load it or anything, but are you concerned about there being a lack of election and poll workers come election day 2024?
It's definitely something I'm monitoring, and I'm glad you brought that up because it's something at VoteBeat we're watching. We have a lot less institutional knowledge in the state because of the people who have left counties and the state because of either threats, or the job got too stressful because of threats, or just, the job itself is not that you can do other things and make the same amount of money. So there's a big retention and recruitment problem for election officials. Poll workers may be intimidated by what they saw in 2022. But I do think that there is more interest in elections. So, like, are they still going to get the same number of poll workers just because of that? People want to come and see the process. Like, I'm not too worried about it for the intense interest in elections that was never there before, but I guess we'll see. I'm going to start tracking that, so you guys follow my work if you want to see if that's a problem here.
Right on. So Farrell has a question. Does your reporting overlap at all with Christian nationalism?
I would say that there's a large sect of the like election denying or election skeptic crowd that is very influenced by their religious beliefs, just because that is the same kind of cohort of people. And we see like events like Trump coming to churches here to speak. And so like in that way, I feel it's very connected. I don't hear a lot of like religious claims about the election or that kind of thing, but I do know that that's like a large sect of that, I guess, far right group is the same group that has the doubts about the elections and are bringing this up. So, and I think you see like Carrie Lake out there trying to appeal to those voters by talking about God and talking about her religious beliefs. And so there's a lot of crossover there.
Yeah, or even, the statements being made about like, this is the candidate chosen by God or whatever, like we need to go back to God, or even people who are, um, flying their appeal to heaven flags, or, have these memberships to organizations that are very, definitely like trying to get people into elected office who will lead with biblical intention or whatever. Let's see this now. I don't know if she'll be able to answer this one, but it's a good question. Jay is asking, might you have any information about new voter registration, like with Dems, Republicans, Independents, up, down, flat? Where are we at?
So we had independents surpass Republicans sometime this summer. And then it just flipped again. And that's probably because of the approaching presidential primary election that only the Democrats and Republicans can vote in. Like often as you approach that, more people are switching to one party or the other. So I think after the election, it probably will at some point go back to more independents than Republicans here. But as of right now, the Republicans just have like a little bit of an edge.
Do you think that now there's a greater understanding amongst independents that in order to be able to participate, that they do have to do that? Or do you think that that's, not a significant amount of people who realize that now?
No, I think in the general public, there's a lot of confusion about our primaries here. And I don't know how to help that. Like Stephen Richer has done a whole, our county recorder has done a whole marketing campaign, trying to like talk about registering to vote, check your voter registration and all of that. But I think the primary, where you're able to vote in the primary, if you're an independent in July, but you're not able to vote in this one, is very confusing for people. And other than just like continuing to say it out loud, I don't know what the solution is there. So.
And I know that you're not a policymaker, but given the extensive research and reporting that you've done, like, do you have a potential policy solution for this?
I mean, I think if we take a look at like why we're doing our system in the way that we are, in like a comprehensive look, and like why we aren't allowing independence, we could figure that out. But there are proposals to change it. I wrote about just in my voter guide on that published Wednesday, a proposal that would create open primaries and would completely wipe out this issue. And it might be on the ballot if they get enough signatures. So like there are people thinking about this issue, but other than education at this point, there's like nothing we can do like on the spot for this election.
Yeah. There is a question in here that comes from Samantha. Have you ever considered running for an election? It's funny because Robert immediately jumped in and said, I don't think she's that crazy, but I'll let you answer for yourself. Would you
No,
consider running for an
that's
election?
so funny. No, I am not that crazy. You were correct. Sorry, I didn't mean offense to you. Um, I I know how much scrutiny I have received in my position as a journalist, and like how much that's impacted my private life. And I would never, for that reason, like choose to like put myself even more out there, right? Like I'm a pretty private person. And it takes like, like candidates get, their whole life scrutinized when they announce they're running. So that's not never occurred to me. I also just kind of like being a journalist. Like I'll like,
I ran now I ran twice for my local school board, undefeated. And then I tried other offices, not so much undefeated. And I'm so happy now in this space because I watch these legislative committee hearings from the comfort of my home and I nearly have an aneurysm every time I turn it on. So if I had to be there and maintain decorum, it just wouldn't happen. So I'm really, really grateful at the no offense. I know Bonnie probably voted for me and maybe some others, but I'm perfectly good here right now. Okay, let's see. Jacqueline says my elderly neighbor and her group of friends are going to be poll workers because, as she puts it, they are so pissed off at how people are being treated for trying just to vote, to help people to vote. I love that. That is so great. And then Jude also posted a link if you would like to volunteer as a poll worker. I love this kind of activism. Mars is letting everybody know that the local FFRF Freedom from Religion Foundation chapter is hosting secular civic engagement training tonight at 6:30 on Zoom. And folks from CEBV, Civic Engagement Beyond Voting, and our own community members who are active in their LDs will be stopping in to help us get more involved. And they put a link there, so that is there if you would like to join. I didn't even know that was on there, and I look at that calendar all the time. Mars, what the heck? Okay, here we go. Dee is asking, have you tried to tie legislators to ALEC and other folk organizations?
I think that that is part of the grand picture of like influence, right? And so Alex specifically, not recently for the candidates that I've written about, but there are other groups that are very influential here in Arizona elections. And I think that it's important for like all the connections to be made there. So, I wrote about like the Dropbox watchers, how they were connected to this group called True the Vote that was spreading the Dropbox lies in the first place, who, was connected at the time to Pinal County Sheriff Mark Lamb, and trying to kind of like go the back channel to this constitutional sheriff group and spread information that way. So like these connections they're all over the place, and I think it's important to like lay them out.
Yeah, fully agree. Yes. Ian says, I tend to get offended when people say I should run for office. Like, why would you wish that on me? I thought you liked me. Absolutely, Ian. And thanks, Jude. Yes, it's not a volunteer position to be a poll worker. You get paid at least minimum wage. So thank you for correcting me on that. All right, let's see. We are at 12:55. So, and I don't see any more questions in the chat. Like I said, I know people are really excited. I had so many people texting me and like, yay, wait. But we end our Friday discussions because this is heavy stuff. I don't know about you, Jen, but like I suffer from like existential late stage capitalism anxiety. And so it's tough, in these streets when you're covering this stuff all the time. Like where do you find hope? When we're living in such a really troublesome time, everything seems chaotic and crazy, and we're more divided than ever. What is it that gives you hope?
I would say like civic engagement groups, like I'm speaking to, like I did one, civic engagement beyond voting. I spoke to them. Um, timeline, I don't know when, a few weeks ago, I think, a month ago maybe, and seeing groups like this, no matter where they're at in the spectrum, is just really encouraging because you guys are like my eyes. Like I can't have eyes everywhere, and so like I need groups to tell me what's going on, tell me what they're worried about, like tell me like that's what I said, like tell me what county you're in and what you're thinking about. So that gives me hope that people are engaged.
Well, right on. And that is, like I said, we're gonna have Melinda Merkel Iyer on for next Friday's speaker series, and she's gonna be breaking down absolutely everything. Also, I would like to let everybody know that this weekend on Sunday we will be at the Willow Home Tour. And I think that starts at 9, goes to like 5 o'clock. So stop on by, sign up, get some secular merch. But in the meantime, I just want to say thank you so much, Jen Fifield, for coming to us and enlightening us today about the work that you do and about what we can expect for this election cycle. I appreciate you so much. And I know everybody else on the call does too. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You guys have a great day.
All right, everybody. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next week with CEBB. Bye, everybody.